It's episode 3 of The Sauce. I am Irish Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com. I'm joined by Kevin Bauer, our co-host on this venture. He was known as Bauer Sauce on Seminole Headlines when he used to send in questions to the show very regularly. He dropped off. He kind of dropped us like a bad habit, but that's fine. But he's here with us now, and this is episode 3 of this new series we're doing here at Warchant.com. So how's it going, Kevin? You doing good?
Going good.
Season's
How about you?
just the season's so close we can taste it. The topic we're going to talk about today is the Florida State's transfer portal. I guess the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows. We've seen all of it now. The first couple of years that Mike Norvell went heavy in the transfer portal, it was all beautiful. It was all good. I mean, there were some misses. They certainly missed on some guys, but there were so many hits and so many guys made a big impact that we kind of just felt like, man, keep shopping on that aisle. And then last year happened, and but I think some people wanted Florida State maybe to turn back to high school recruiting, that was going to be the key. You can't live in the portal. And so what Mike Norvell did is went out and got another 30 guys out of the portal. And so here we are again. What's your vibe, man, as you kind of think about what's happened over the last 12, 24 months? Like they've went from success to failure in the portal. Now they're going heavy in the portal again, going into the season. You confident that they've done it right this time, or are you scarred by what they did last year?
No, I feel confident. I felt confident last year too, so we'll see what happens. But no, I do feel more confident this season. I think that, and we kind of hit on it in a previous cast about this. The floor needs to be raised, and it seems like we have said, "Hey, let's build a team that can win games. Let's build a football team." Where last year it was much of let's get right back to where we were and try to go for it all. And then that clearly wasn't the case with those players and just that makeup of a team and chemistry. But this year the hope is that the chemistry is great. We can't see that until it happens, until games start getting played. Because at the end of the day, practice chemistry, it's dependent on what happens when you play those games. And I think this year it seems that these players are coming in with more established history in their college career and will be able to produce hopefully equivalent to that, if not better, with better players around them. So I feel confident in it, but I also am a skeptic at nature and want to watch some football.
Do you do you worry about the I think a lot of people think that inherently though there's still a problem with guys not necessarily coming up through your program the way they traditionally did, not necessarily caring about your program the way they traditionally did. Um, do you think and I don't know if I have a strong opinion. I think every case is different, but when you look back at those guys last year, how much of do you think them kind of, I'm going to say quitting, but certainly didn't seem to care a whole lot once things went south. I mean, I think they would have cared if there was success. I think those
Mhm.
guys would have kept caring if they were doing well, but once they weren't doing well, they haven't been in the program for 3 or 4 years. Do you think, I mean, the sport's changed so much. Is that still a factor? Do you worry about that? Or do you feel like, man, that's just how the sport is. Everybody's going to have to deal with that. And there's no sense in worrying about it. Like, how do you see that?
I see that with I think it's I think the sport has changed. We're going to have to deal with transfers and new people, large numbers, meaning 10 people coming in each year. That's going to say to everyone that's sitting, let's say you have an ideal program that you've been recruiting through the high school ranks and you're sitting in a good spot like Georgia over here, and you're going to bring in those guys that can make your team better, and that might upset some chemistry and culture in that locker room, but you're willing to deal with that with 10 players and you've already got something established. I think the situation at Florida State that makes it so difficult is we're sitting here with a transfer portal, with success, then the snub happens. Then you're saying, what do we do? And you go right back to the transfer portal. And now that we've seen the season play out, it didn't go well. Well, now I would love to be back in the high school portal last year, or high school recruiting last year, to say, hey, let's establish the ranks in the high school the right way. But at the end of the day, what Mike has to win games, or he's not going to be the coach here to
Right.
be able to recruit high school players. So when he's going to have to make that call, I don't know, to switch back, because I think ideally a high school recruits 3-4 years over time is going to be your best bet. But games have to be won first. So
Yeah.
I think this year I'm fine with another 30 transfers. I think it makes sense because we went 2-10 last year, and high school guys aren't going to help us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mike Norvell's not getting the 5 year window to rebuild a program
Mm-hmm.
in year
Mm-hmm.
six. I do think we should talk a little bit about last year. So you were excited about those guys, like when you heard about, and I'm not. This isn't judging because we were all wrong. Because I think the media certainly, um, if not led the charge, was part of the wave. Um, but like, were you? Did you have reservations about like the Marvin Joneses and um, some of those guys, or were you thinking, or were you just fired up? Like these guys were highly rated coming out of high school. Jalen Brown. I mean, there was a bunch of guys who they had, Earl Little, who's still at Florida State right now, and they're counting on this year. A lot of those guys who Florida State couldn't get coming out of high school, and then they go 13-0 and they become attractive, and they were able to get those guys the second time around, even though they didn't do anything at the previous schools. Had you kind of just not worried about that? What was your mindset going into last year?
I'd say there was some trepidation on like I don't know what these players are. I've not seen them play. It does make it a little more difficult when they haven't produced. Not that you can't hope for production, but there was some reservation last year knowing that it was the same mindset as when we got all the guys that succeeded in Verse and Jermaine Johnson. I was like, who are these guys? And then they played on the field, and I was like, all right, that's cool. So I was hopeful for that to
Yeah,
continue, but I would say I definitely had a wandering eye saying, hey, what are we going to be this year? And then, hope's a dangerous thing after the first drive of Georgia Tech because I was like, oh, well, look at this. Roy Dell Williams, Heisman, let's go.
yeah,
And then, it didn't play out that way. So I had hope, but I'm in nature a little skeptic and am going to sit there and want to see something first. Last year, yeah,
yeah. And I think
the hope went away quickly.
uh, I think going back to why they missed, and I think
Mm-hmm.
because I think some people will look at Mike Norvell and say, okay, well, how did you screw up? The year before, the 2 or 3 years before, you hit it with Jermaine Johnson, you hit it with Jared Verse and those guys. And as a reminder, Jermaine Johnson did play at Georgia, but at the time there were questions about, well, why would he leave Georgia to come to Florida State? What's wrong there? There's something wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
There was some skepticism. Also, it wasn't like he put up huge numbers there. I think he had maybe four sacks, 4 to 5 sacks the year before at Georgia. As a situational guy, he was not a starter. Um, but I think when we saw him in spring practice, we're like, oh my gosh! I mean, this guy looks completely different from anybody else that's on this football team. But I think last year, because of the snub, and we talked about this I think on the last episode, is or it might have been the first episode, but the idea of trying to reload so quickly with impact players, but also kind of maybe shooting for the stars. Tatum Bethune, was not a super celebrated transfer portal addition. I mean, he had 100 tackles at UCF, but he wasn't a super highly recruited kid out of high school. And he was, he was on a pretty average team, and he had decent, good numbers, but on a bad defense. And so people weren't like super fired up. But it's like it felt like they didn't go for that level of player. It felt like they went
Mm-hmm.
for guys who maybe could be superstars. They got Sean Murphy from Alabama, who was super highly recruited coming out of high school, but didn't do anything at Alabama. The guys I mentioned before, there's several other examples. This year, they've definitely gone back to the old script. These guys, a ton of these guys. I think if you look at Florida State's football team when they take the field against Alabama, it may be I don't know, 16, 15, 16 first year transfers on the team. On the starting offense, there might be nine brand new players, transfers, that came in this season. Uh, so I guess, from a fan's perspective, do you look at these guys totally as their own group, and is this new kind of approach, which is closer to the old approach, or do you look at all transfers a little bit more jaundice with a more jaundiced eye, after what happened last year?
No, I don't think impacts last year always impacts this year. But as far as the transfers and my expectations, when you were saying that, that made a lot of sense to me about, especially with the Tatum Bethune example, you are bringing in people that have shown something or a glimpse of something and not based off of the recruiting status prior to, regardless of when it was. Um, Production comes into play. I think that this year, yeah, I'm not discouraged by last year transfer recruits for this year, but I still need to wait and see what culture looks like, because I think that every season's new. Just like we talked about last week, we're not going to sit here and tell you if the ball rolls a different way, the 2-10 doesn't happen, and we're winning 10 games. But the start of a season and the locker room with people that don't know each other is so crucial. We've got to win early, I think, for that hope we're looking for to transpire. Is somewhat successful early. You have to look like a football team against Alabama. You don't necessarily have to win, but in order for this team to succeed, my opinion is there has to be 3 or 4 wins in the first 5 weeks.
So you're a big culture guy.
Oh, who isn't?
I can tell you
No,
some people. No,
I think it's crucial. It's human emotions, and if you have a collective of people that have wild, angry emotions, it's just not a good situation to be in. So,
it, yeah, it's funny because there is some pushback I would say in the media,
mhm,
and sometimes in the fan base, that because culture is nebulous and it's undefined, that uh, I feel like a lot of people kind of crap on it now. And I'm with you,
mhm,
man. I think it's huge. And I think that was a huge part of where they went wrong last year. I think one of the ways Mike Norvell went wrong with that team was, and there were a lot of them, but one of them was I think he believed the culture was so good
mhm,
that when you bring in these new guys, they're going to assimilate. And they're just going to, be part of it because that is really what happened. I mean, Jermaine Johnson, I think would tell you there's a reason Jermaine Johnson represents Florida State on social media. He was at Georgia for, a year or two also. And, he started his career at junior college, then went to Georgia, then came to Florida State. But, he had his most success at Florida State. So that's why there's going to be an affinity. But also, I think he realizes he kind of became a better person. Like he became a better teammate. I think Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, those guys, they, um, you know, they were good. They were good character guys probably coming in, but also they 100% bought into whatever the culture is Mike Norvell is trying to create. And there were guys on the team who came in that he inherited. Renardo Green is a guy that was here before Mike Norvell, and I think early in the tenure there was a lot of conflict there, and it didn't look like it was going to go in the right direction. And then at some point he bought in. Then you bring in Tatum Bethune and those guys who it was like a perfect mix. So a perfect example to me, again, I go back to Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson's another one that if the culture wasn't good, I think it could have gone poorly with them.
mhm.
So I do think it mattered. I do think it mattered. But when you go and get boat raced by Georgia, it makes people think, what is culture? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Mhm.
Because if you had good culture, A, maybe those guys don't leave, and B, you don't just fold in that game. Um, so I think from that standpoint, I understand why people may wonder about it. Um, but I'm with you. I mean, I believe in it. It's just hard to define for people, I think.
Sure. I, when you're talking there with culture from year to year to year to year, that is almost only dependent on Mike because he's the head coach and he's going to say this can't go or this needs to be a part of this program. I think one of the reasons why I'm not sitting here scared this year because of what happened last year and the problem with culture from year to year is that the only way to fix culture is to get people out and get people in,
Mhm.
and that's clearly happened. There's a
Right.
huge in and out this year that could make that happen. That was an issue I always had with Jimbo at the end of like, well, how does this get fixed? Like, how do you fix this culture that's been built at that time with no transfer portal in the same way that it is now? But now it's much different. I don't like just exploding your team, pulling in half a new team, but sometimes you have to do what's right. I don't like being bald, but sometimes you got to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna have to bring that. We're gonna have to bring in transfers this year to fix that problem, and then you work from there. Like fix that culture problem
Yeah.
with a mass exodus and a new wave.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think in this era, I mean, I don't think you have any choice. I mean, again, unless you're
Mm-hmm.
Georgia, I get a little irritated when people, well, Georgia doesn't have to do this. Well, Ohio State doesn't. They were rolling when this happened. Like they were already rolling when we went to this world. Florida State
Mm-hmm.
was not. Florida State was at the worst possible place at that time, so they had to go all in, and it was their ticket to success. But now you're in it, and it's like, okay, well, now you got to fight that battle. But I do think so. It's a combination of identifying guys, the right guys to bring in, and not taking anything for granted. I think that was the kind of the lesson I think Mike Norvell learned last year is just because you're here, just because, as you said, he's the one constant. Just because you're here, just because you're saying the same things, doesn't mean it's
Mm-hmm.
going to work when you with a bunch of different guys. And I think in a different universe, if they win the Georgia Tech game, if things do change early in that season, to your point, if you have some success early, maybe things go differently. But it didn't, and so now the question is, okay, what if things don't go well against Alabama? How do these guys handle it? Does the culture stand up, or do guys look around and say, "Hey, man, I've only been here for 8 months. You know, what do I care?" Um, but I guess the going back to the idea of the production, and that was the big lesson. I mean, I think if Mike Norvell had to list his 10 things he learned or mistakes he made a year ago, they definitely went way. The pendulum swung the other way completely now in terms of production, because if you look at these guys on offense, and when people ask me what do I think about this team, I'm more confident in the offense because I think if that's what you're looking at is like, you know, who's actually produced before. I think the guys on this offense have done it. I think it'll be 9 new starters, and we can go through some of them. Here today, they've done it. I mean, Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White have done it. Deuce didn't catch 60 balls at USC, but he was one of the top 3 or 4 guys in a highly prolific offense. And the physical tools are there. And to me, if you're catching over 20 passes, in a couple of years, that's you can play at this level. I think.
Mm-hmm.
How confident are you in Deuce Robinson?
I'll, I I agree with your point about 20 receptions, 30 receptions in a couple of years. Like, because receivers don't see the light, they don't see the field if you're not going to block and you're not going to produce on your own team. So I have confidence in him for 2 reasons. One, he has produced on that team that likes to throw the ball, and two, that's a big man,
Yeah,
and I a big man that can control his body, and that's actually something that's taken for granted so much. The bigger
great
you
point.
are, the harder it is to control your body. I think it could be crucial to this offense, especially with the way Mike wants to run it. And if you got a guy you can throw it up to, it changes his whole offense. It
And that's a
changes his
great
whole offense.
and that's a great point about the controlling your body because I think uh, Hakeem Williams has been in the news a little bit lately because he's a 5-star recruit for Florida State, big time wide receiver signee 2 or 3 years ago. Transferred to Colorado this offseason. Hasn't really done much at Florida State, partly by injury, but partly because he just hasn't developed. And I think a lot of people are looking at him as a litmus test for Mike Norvell in Florida State because why didn't he do anything here? If he goes to Colorado and catches 60, 70 passes, but man, I think you nailed it with body control with him. I just didn't see him as a guy who you want to talk about that a little bit because I mean, I think
Sure.
in my world, Kevin, you're a good athlete, so I'm going to call you a good athlete. I may be uncomfortable with you, but I think you're a
It's all
good athlete.
relative.
You've certainly been around good athletes. What describe that? Because I don't think it's something we ever talk about. We talk about heights, weights, speed, but why do you think that's so important?
That is interesting. From my perspective, if I'm playing athletic, if I'm playing an athletic venture, I'm immediately diagnosing what's going on. All right, that person's going to destroy me at anything I do. That person is way taller than me. I need to watch out for their height. That guy's fast. I'm looking around. I'm judging people. Problem, but that's what we're doing in sports.
Yeah.
I almost never look at a tall guy and be like, I'm not gonna be able to do something to this guy because I'm going to assume that they don't have the control of their body. Tall, I'm 6'2". So when I say tall, I'm talking about a taller guy than me, 6'5" and above. Anyone, once you hit that marker, what I've seen, once you hit that marker, unless you're playing sports professionally at 6'5", it's real hard to do exactly what you want with your body.
Yeah.
And that extrapolates higher and higher, like with especially with Johnny, like being 6'7". I didn't have a problem with any drop balls he had. I thought you catching a lot of those balls at 6'7", because
Yeah.
if he was 5'11", 30% of those balls are caught, regardless of his hand skill. So there's a huge gain you get from your size of your body, but it can all be made inept if you can't control that body. And the clips I've seen of Deuce, I haven't gone back and watched his USC film, but the clips I've seen of Deuce and what he's doing with his body confidently, and when you see a big guy move confidently, you're like, okay, well, this one might be an issue.
Yeah,
You
that's good.
know?
That's a great point, and that's what Keon Coleman. That's why he got
Mm-hmm.
drafted when he got drafted. That's why they thought he might be the number one receiver for Buffalo because he's got the size at 6'4", and he can jump, and he's got the body control. Deuce Span's another guy that came in a couple years ago for Florida State. Again, 6'4", can run like the wind, was one of the fastest guys on the team. But when the ball's in the air, can you go get
Mm-hmm.
it? Another example I'm just thinking of, just because I happen to have my baseball team, the Orioles, happens to have a couple of 6'3", 6'5" pitchers, relievers, and they can't hold runners at all because they're not as nimble on the mound.
Mm-hmm.
And so like once they start into their windup, like they can't control the runners. Now they can throw it 100 miles an hour, like Felix Bautista can throw it 100 miles an hour. You know, he's big guy's gonna have surgery, so I feel bad for him. But same type of thing, right? I mean, the bigger you get, that's what you want, but you also have to have the body control, and I think that's a great point. And Deuce does seem to have that. The clip they put out in preseason camp of him catching that ball over Jerry Wilson
Mm-hmm.
showed some of that. So now that's exciting. Squirrel White is probably on offense the number one most proven guy. Again, I think he's. I don't know if he gets as much hype as he should. Um,
His name's Squirrel. How's he not getting more? You know, talk about a name. That's it right there.
and I think part of it's like, what have you done for me lately? Because he didn't put up bigger numbers last year when he was injured, but 2 years ago at Tennessee, he caught over 60 passes, and he did it at Tennessee. It feels like that should be. I don't know. And again, he doesn't look the part. I mean, he doesn't look like a monster. You said his name's Squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smaller dude, slight of build, and he has had some injury concerns, and that's something we'll have to watch. But man, he apparently is one of the fastest two or three guys on the team. Caught 60 something passes 2 years ago. So again, so now you got two guys at wide receiver compared to what you had a year ago. Again, go back to a year ago. You bring in a guy like Jalen Brown who did nothing at LSU. Malik Benson, who was a highly recruited junior college guy 2 years ago or 3 years ago, went to Alabama, did really nothing, caught in the teens of passes, made 15 passes. To now you've got Deuce and Squirrel. I mean, it's almost impossible to even like compare the two. So you got, I mean, the confidence is high at receiver, right?
Personally, yeah. If you have, there's so many teams in the world in all sports of football that don't have two receivers, and they don't have to look alike. You don't have to have two big ones, but you have two receivers. Yeah, you got a wide receiver too, but do you have two guys that are actual wide receivers? And I'll even go back to body control. It doesn't matter how big you are. Like the importance of where and how you have your body to catch the ball in football is so undermined in the fans' perspective of I don't, fast, tall, none of that matters if you're not putting yourself in a good position to catch the ball so it doesn't get ripped out and or so you can cut right upfield. And I think with Squirrel, the biggest confidence I have in him is we're talking about college football and a quarterback decided to throw you 60 times. That's not as much as it can be in the script. A quarterback, another kid your age said, I'm throwing it to him. So the
Right.
confidence that that shows to me, I like it. And the injuries is a concern, but injuries happen when they happen. I don't sit and wait for someone to have an injury. It's just that's a part of the game.
Going around the offense, I mean, another guy at tight end that's probably going to start. Randy Pittman came from UCF. They are super high on him. Again, really another productive guy. I don't have the numbers from me. I think he caught 35, 36 passes, something like that last year. Also, a guy they want to put the ball in his hands. As you know, he played running back in high school. He can be an H back. So again, another new face, but has proven himself. He played in this offense for Gus Malzahn and was one of the first guys Gus wanted to bring over. When he came here, so that's a big one too. They picked up Gavin Sawchuk at running back from Oklahoma. I can't remember if you said you were. Yeah, I don't think you were down at the bowl game against
Okay,
Oklahoma,
no.
but he had 100 yards against Florida State in that game. He's probably I would say maybe the biggest question I think of those guys because I think
Mhm.
to me I know Randy Pittman's going to be a big contributor. I'm very confident in Deuce and Squirrel. Um, you know, Gavin, he's he's probably not as talented as Usman Cromah, the freshman. He's not as big and strong as Roydell Williams, who was on the team last year but missed most of the year due to injury. Um, he might be the best combination of the two. Um, so me personally, I kind of go into it with a wait and see with him. I don't know if I don't know if they see him as, yeah, man, there may be games where he has 20, and again, there was a couple years ago, he had 500-yard games. I mean, he's been a proven college football player. Um, but I don't think it's not clearly defined yet. Um, but do you just look at it like, man, it's just good he's on your team? It's just another option.
Absolutely that. I was excited to see his name because the first thing I thought of was that bowl game. That was a first Florida State game I missed the whole thing in a long time. I scheduled a flight and had no clue we were playing in that bowl game then, and I'm sitting there in the airport watching half of it, and I get back on and we had won the game. It was the game ending when I got back on. But anyway, Sawchuk, I'm excited about Sawchuk because we didn't bring in a stud running back, almost like probably what Roydell expected to be. We didn't
Right.
bring in the RB1. We brought in a complementary piece, and that's a position you need to do that at. Because at running back, give me as many horses in the stable as you can get. If you can play, you can play, especially with the way Mike wants to run an offense. It's not about feeding one guy for the whole game. I'll feed the guy the whole game if his hand's hot. And somebody like that seems to be a spark plug, 5 games of 100 yards. Like if you got that in you, then
Yeah.
yeah, let's give you the ball 3 or 4 times in the first quarter, and if you're on, then boom. And then if not, we've got 2 other guys that we can go to.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
my mentality at running back is a stable, and I think Mike kind of has the same difference. You can see it in the guys he's put out.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think there's sometimes a perception of with portal guys because you don't have them for 3 or 4 years. It's like, are they going to be a star or are they a bust?
Mhm.
It feels like there's little room in the middle for nuance, and so Sawchek may not be a superstar, but he might be huge on this team because of
Mhm.
he gives you another guy in that room. On the offensive line, that's where I mean, basically four starters are probably going to be first year transfers. The tackle, Micah Pettis from Ole Miss, Gunnar Hansen from Vanderbilt, center Luke Pettibone from Wake Forest, and then probably one of the guards, Adrian Medley from UCF. He also played for Gus Malzahn there, and Herb Hand, or it could be possibly Jacob Rizzi, who came in last year from Harvard, and then Richie Leonard, who came in last year from Florida. So those are your top six linemen. Four of them came in this year. Two of them came in last year. I just want to talk about the offensive line probably as a group because
Mhm.
that group. I mean, listen, the offensive line was such a disaster last year, and so I think a lot of Florida State fans are. That's the first question people ask me a lot of times. What's the offensive line going to look like? Um, I think it'll be worlds better, but I don't know how high that. What does that mean? Like, I'm saying like they were so low that I don't know if will they be good? Will they just be average? Is average okay? How do
Right.
you view that? Like what do you are they're not going to push around Alabama's defensive line. I don't, anybody that thinks that that's going to happen is probably going to be disappointed. But what do they have to do? Like, what are you looking for from that group?
Hold. Can you hold?
Oh,
Can you hold on? Now, I don't actually mean holding penalties. I
right.
mean, can you hold on enough to not let somebody run through you, especially against that Alabama game? I'm encouraged with offensive line because one, we've got another mass exodus, bunch of people coming in, couple guys that are holdovers that seem to be good fits. It seems like we liked them. There's a reason you brought them in anyway. Anyone that transferred in prior to this year and they're still here, I'm pretty committed to that person because
That's a good. Yeah,
so is
that's
the
a good point.
coaching staff, right?
Right.
But with offensive line, I think anytime anytime you have a new position coach or a new coordinator, there usually comes momentum and hope with that. And I think with the offensive line, and we have new offensive line coach, I think things like that are going to change that situation quicker than it would have been if we had some of those guys still here last year. I think it's a complete new offensive line set, and to have them come out, let's see what they do. But again, we're looking at Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell, who are big on stables of running backs and a lot of tight end usage. So our blocking will always be helped out with those guys as well. It's
Right.
important to their offense to have protection outside of the five guys up front.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. A lot of the blocking is going to come from the receivers and the tight ends and misdirection, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that it's not just hey go maul these guys. They're in the early 2000s or in the 90s
Mhm.
really, but early 2000s Florida State, they had some really great offensive lines and you could just maul people. This is going to be a little bit different, so you maybe don't have to have those guys. So I think that that's the right approach. I think you're going into it with the right mindset. Same one I am in the sense of, listen, this offensive line doesn't need to be unbelievable, but can you just be serviceable and give this offense a chance? And I think they're going to be able to do that. Look, all these guys have started a ton. I mean, and again, this is the difference. You brought in guys who started multiple years at their prior schools. Gunnar Hansen started for multiple years at Vanderbilt. Luke Pettibone started for multiple years at Wake Forest. I mean, across the Micah Pettis did. They all started a lot of games at their prior schools. So I think that's really positive. I think we'll switch to the defense if that's cool, because I think this side of the ball is the side I'm a little bit more concerned about, because I feel like they brought in some guys who have a lot of experience. They brought in some guys who are proven. I mean, if you look at cornerback, I mean, it goes by Jerry Wilson now. When he signed with Florida State, it was Jeremiah Wilson. He was Jeremiah Wilson at Syracuse. He was Jeremiah Wilson at Houston. He was Jeremiah Wilson back in high school in Central Florida, but now he's Jerry Wilson.
He
Um,
manifested a Black Jerry.
he did. I wonder if maybe he was a listener and
That's
maybe
probably what it was.
and
That
he's
was
like
what that's what sent him over the edge. Yeah.
it's for yeah. If you watch Seminole headlines, that's an inside joke. But yeah, we had a one time we had a the question came up. You don't hear excuse me, you got me choked up. There aren't a lot of Jerrys. You don't hear a lot of Jerrys anymore. And then like you certainly don't hear a lot of black Jerrys. And we went through basically this whole show with not really coming up with Jerry Rice or a lot of other
All
black
the other
Oh,
Jerrys that
where are all
exist.
the other
Yeah.
black Jerrys? Jerry Johnson played Florida State. Anyway, turns out there are some, and Jerry Wilson has joined the fold. And but I think he's the probably I think of the Elijah Herring at linebacker.
Mhm.
They've got a few guys that are like, yeah, man, these guys played, produced, started at the prior schools. Jerry Wilson at Houston had 4 picks last year. I think he got some all conference honors at the end of the last season. He's played a ton of. He started a bunch of games over the last 2 years at Houston and Syracuse. He feels like some of these guys on offense where okay, there's talent there and they've been productive. So you feel like you know what you're going to get. And it's clear he's going to be one of the starting cornerbacks. I think Elijah Herring at linebackers, same boat. He was one of the top tacklers at Memphis last year. He's one of the top tacklers at Tennessee before that. He's a guy that plays college football, has played it, and records tackles and is productive. So I feel like those guys, you know what you've got. But I think, some of these other guys, even if they were productive, maybe it was a much lower level. And so on that side of the ball, I'm a little bit more curious. When you look at the defensive side, and we'll touch on some more of these guys, Kevin, but is continuity more important on the defensive side? It feels like it is, right?
That's what I was is thinking the whole time you were talking about that continuity and culture. Like
Right.
it really is so much more crucial because you can have diva wide receivers exist all the time, and you
Right.
can be an individualist on offense. If you're getting fed, you can be happy. That can go on a little while on defense, and then it's over until you start pointing fingers, and we're looking like that 2018 secondary, and you're like, what's going on? It's so crucial to play together, and it's going to be it is a harder thing to do to bring in new people to like each other and work well together. So the skepticism of like, I don't know about the defense. It is a harder transition for new people to produce on defense than it would be on offense. I think if people are getting fed on offense, there's more results they can go back on and be like, oh no, I'm happy. But on defense, like you're not stacking up 15 picks a year. This is not a thing. So the reward and the gratification is less obvious, I think.
Yeah, and
More
that's a
of
great point,
it's a
man.
team situation.
No, that's a great point. And it's something we haven't talked about much. And this is why one of the big reasons I wanted to do the sauce is to get more voices in the conversation and other smart people that know sports. It's something honestly, I don't think we've talked about that at all in any of the shows we've done. Um, Defense is about sacrifice to a big degree. Like one guy's going to make the tackle. Maybe if the statistician's generous, two guys get half a
Mm.
tackle. But in general, one player makes a tackle, but only because 10 other people sacrificed something on that play. Whether it was covering a guy they knew wasn't going to get the ball, whether it was, just sticking their nose in there and forcing a run outside. And if you don't have, that's where I think the defense last year got. I don't think the talent on last year's defense was as bad as it looked. I think once they realized they were not going to be a playoff team, they're not going to win the conference. This is not what they signed up for, and the offense is never going to score a freaking point.
That's what I was about to say right there. That's another thing about like that's the team unity expanded. Like
Right.
if you're not going to help us out, well, what are we doing? But sorry.
Like going back to basketball, it's like, yeah, man, the guy who comes down and jacks up the shot that he's probably going to make 7% of the time, and now we got to run our asses back on defense. It's
You're looking at everyone like, what's going on?
so
Big
yeah, no,
size.
yeah, I think it's a great point. And maybe subconsciously that's part of the reason I'm a little bit nervous about the defense because again, I think there are some proven guys, on the defensive line. Um, you bring in Deontay McCray, who's played a lot of football, but it is going to be a big step up. I mean, he was at Western Kentucky, and he was productive as a defensive lineman at Western Kentucky. But now you're going to be going up against Alabama. What does that look like? And they've been talking him up in camp, but again, those are positions to me, in that to me, Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, you caught passes at that level on offense, it's going to translate. I don't have any doubt it's going to translate. Defensive lineman or Diamante Diggs, who they brought in from, I think he originally was at Youngstown State. Well, he was at a smaller school, then he was at Youngstown State. Um, you know, there, again, it's just what is it going to look like when you're going up play after play after play against these, massive, big, strong, athletic dudes. Um, those are questions. I don't know how you can feel good about that. And then even James Williams, who is been celebrated as one of the really high profile transfers, because if you look at the numbers per play at Nebraska, he was super productive. I think he had 5 or 6 sacks, but he didn't. He was only a situational pass rusher. He wasn't on the field a ton of plays, and so the excitement is okay. What if he's on the field? He's put on some weight, maybe 10, 15, 20 pounds, whatever you believe. Um, can he be an every down defensive lineman? That's a big question. So even though he played at Nebraska and he played against some really good offenses and was productive in games, he's taking a big step too. So like, what are the odds you're going to hit on all those? So that's where my concern is probably on the defensive line.
All valid. I think we were all saying the same thing a couple years ago with Braden Fisk. Well, how's
Yeah,
he going to look when he's coming in? And then we were pleasantly surprised
no, you're
because
right, 100%.
I don't think anyone was like Fisk is that man coming into the season. There were hopes of like that'd be nice if he. I think I remember Jeff being like it'd be nice if he were nasty at defensive tackle, running right up the middle, but you don't
Yeah,
see that coming. So we're looking at three or four guys like that this year. And James Williams, you can see his size and you see him move, and you feel. I think you're going to feel a little more confident than what you saw at Braden Fisk at Western Michigan, but it's still unknowns. And again, to your point about the wide receivers, those guys produced at a high level at Tennessee and USC, and the ones we're talking about on defense haven't done that. And Houston, that's production, but that's not even the ACC. That's not the SEC. It's not the same type of defense, if you will.
no, that's a good point. Even I mentioned, I think before, I ran into Jimbo Fisher recently, and I asked him if he had seen Jerry Wilson at all, like because he wasn't coaching last year, but maybe he saw some of their games.
Mhm.
He's obviously a big college football guy, and he said he's seen him some. But that was the first thing he said is now you gotta can he do it every week against good competition? Like he's going to be now they're going to play zone, so it's not like he's going to be like, oh, he's always got wide receiver one. But he's going to draw a lot of times. They're going to try to figure out ways to get him on other teams' best receivers, and he's going to be going up against some great ones.
Mhm.
So that'll be so even him. You're right. I think he's more of a sure thing than others, but that's probably not realistic. Also, they Jason Jenkins transferred him from Tennessee. That's actually a huge on the defensive line. Could be a huge positive for Florida State. He suffered an Achilles injury in January after he came in. There was concerns about how available he'd be, when he'd be available. He's been practicing, so they're really excited about him. But again, was not real productive at Tennessee. But he is 6'5", 6'6", 270 pounds,
I
and
made him. I might have made him a star in college football 25, but whatever. He might have transferred to Memphis and we took him, to glory, but we'll see what he can do for us.
you're familiar with him. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm familiar with the size for sure.
yeah. So again, but a little bit unknown. Also, a linebacker, I mentioned Elijah Herring before, who I do feel like is a sure thing, but Stephon Thompson, who the big story with him is the fact that he played for Tony White at Syracuse, then followed him to Nebraska and played from there. And then now he's followed him to Florida State. So obviously, Tony White values him and he's got knowledge of the defense. And he had great production a few years ago, but that was a few years ago. He got injured, missed a year. Then last year at Nebraska, he didn't really do much. I don't think he's going to start, but he has played a lot of college football. I think I'd put him in the Gavin Sawchuk lane,
Okay.
where another linebacker, you know, that's a violent position. It's good to have another guy in that room that you feel like could play. I don't know that he's going to be a marquee guy. Um,
Sure.
so, that's kind of where I am there. I think, and then defensively, I think those are the big um, acquisitions. But, I think there are more homegrown players on that side of the ball. The secondary, you've got a lot of guys that came in. KJ Kirkland, Ashlyn Barker came out of junior college a couple years ago, but he's never played another Division One school. KJ Kirkland at safety. Jabril Rawls at corner is a guy that was homegrown. The other linebackers are basically homegrown. Justin Cryer, Omar Graham, that basically spent their whole careers here. So the defense is more of a mix. It's not you're not relying so heavily on portal guys, but those portal guys have to come through. And I'm just still a little bit more cautious about them. But and then to your point, I mean, if they're not, they say they're all bought in. They're going to talk up the culture in the preseason, obviously. But I guess we'll find out in that game. Like, what do you think we'll know in that Alabama game, or do you think there's still time for them to figure it out?
I think when you said that, I think we were probably bought in. I think they were all bought in last year too, and then the Georgia Tech game happened. I really do think that teams are bought in. It's just a matter of does it stay?
Right.
And to that point, I do think that this year will be. It will. I'm hoping that the locker room message is different. Of hey, we're not. I'm not saying that they're sitting there saying, "Hey, let's go win 8 games," but they're saying, "Hey, we need to take care of business differently than we're running on the national title." I hope we're
Right.
not. That's not the conversation because then you can you can have a situation where you go and lose to Alabama by 17 points and still have a great season. You can absolutely do that with this team if the mentality is right, if the right message is said in the locker room. Not trying to do that, you go out there and you fight and compete against Alabama, and then a win or loss, and you're going to feel really confident going into the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I
it's a
think
situation where 12 teams make a playoff, a loss to Alabama in week one, they know that means nothing
right.
if you
No, that's
go
a
and
great
take care
point.
of
I think
everything else.
and I'm with you 100%. Last year, that team thought because the team before them won 13 games that that's what they were shooting for, and that's what I mean. When they went to ACC kickoff, Josh Farmer and those guys were basically like, "We're going to make people pay for, snubbing us, and
Mm-hmm.
we've got a bad taste in our mouth and all this." And it's like, so their goals were so ridiculously high, and the coaching staff didn't do a good job of managing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's again, it's a good point, something that we probably haven't talked about enough, but this team won't face some of that. Like it would be disappointing if they don't play well against Alabama. It'd be disappointing if they lose, but certainly if they don't play well, but at least you're not crashing down from what you thought,
Correct.
they, as they did a year ago. Well, that was good, man. Anything else on the transfer portal you want to talk about? I think we've covered it. I think
We missed something.
did we?
Did you not see the video the other day? We got Jameis Winston transferring in, or Tommy, or wait, yeah, Tommy. Tommy's his name.
We didn't
What
talk
were your
about
thoughts?
Tommy.
What were your thoughts on him saying he was Jameis, Jameis like? Because I
He
see
started.
it. I see what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing to say because it's Jameis. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you see
It
that from him?
it is funny that we've talked in depth about all these other guys and really didn't talk about Tommy because
Mm-hmm.
to me, I think he is
Good
kind of a
sign, in my
given.
opinion.
Huh?
I think that's a good sign that we're confident in
I
in the offense that
I agree.
we're not even talking about Tommy.
I think you're good. I think you know what you're getting with Tommy Castellanos, and this is where I think if you're realistic with yourself, I think because there was a report out of camp, a national reporter somewhere said that there's been reports that he's been inconsistent in practice as a passer, and it's like, yeah, man. I mean, he's played 3 years of college football. I think we know that he's not going to be the most consistent passer.
Mm-hmm.
What he is, though, is electric as a runner. The pressure that puts on a defense, we've all seen that. We saw that offensive line here these last 2 or 3 years with Jordan Travis versus without Jordan Travis,
Mm-hmm.
and what that did to teams. And so to me, Tommy's the same thing. I mean, Tommy maybe a different level, and so he's going to be dynamic as a runner. I think the way they're going to use him as a passer is suited to him. It's going to be a lot of quick, get the ball out of your hands, uh, you know, a little bit more controlled passing game, and then you're taking shots. But they're not going to ask him to sit back and diagnose the defense and read the entire field and go to his fourth check down. Like that's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be Tommy Castellanos. But you don't have to have that to win. I mean, people loved Arizona State's offense last year. I don't think that quarterback as a freshman was making a bunch of reads. It was get the ball out of his hands or take off. I mean, he's a good athlete, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're going to be looking at here. The comment about Jameis, I, I I think he was talking not about quarterbacking, really, right?
100%. Right.
And but it's one of those things. And in this world, if you put out a headline or something and saying that somebody compared themselves to somebody else, it's like, man, it's just throwing raw meat into
Yes.
a into a thing with the animals. I mean, it's but yeah, I mean, so I don't have because he was talking about personality wise being like kind of
Right.
the personality guy. Um, my favorite
Yeah,
Jameis
being a
story,
spark plug.
yeah, and I probably I've told on headlines. I can't remember if you and I've talked about it, but my favorite Jameis story off the field was at the ACC kickoff one year. All the quarterbacks are there, all the players. It's basically the top players in the ACC are there because they're going to meet with the media, and they're all doing a team picture or a group picture. Basically, two players from every team, and Jameis is one of the FSU guys going into 2014. He's just won the Heisman, and they're all standing around, and he looks at the guy from Georgia Tech, and he's like, and he just looks at everybody. There's like 20 of the best players in the conference all standing there, and he looks at the guy from Georgia Tech, goes, Georgia Tech still rocking the Russell. And and then just everybody else just starts clowning these Georgia Tech guys. It's like telling a kid, like it's like the kid that shows up in the Kmart sneakers in middle school.
Mhm. 100%.
And
Right.
but only Jameis can do that. I mean,
and not be hated.
right. That's
Right.
funny. So Tommy's kind of he brings some of that. I mean, so yeah,
Gotcha.
so you didn't it didn't the hairs on your neck didn't raise like some
When
people.
I saw the headline, I went, "What's happening?" And then keep stop talking. But no, I looked at it. I quickly listened to it, and I was like, "Oh, he doesn't mean he's a Heisman Trophy contender. He means that he's that presence in the, and that's what he said, the presence in the locker room." And yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of that all day. I think that's a good point about Jameis about like, you know, 10 other people could have said that same thing to that Georgia Tech guy, and everyone's like, oh,
Yeah,
and
they're
it's a
gonna.
way different situation. There is something about
Yeah,
charm that he has that it's like that's why he felt that he could get away with the ketchup cups and BB gun fights.
right.
And
Yeah, no,
I, I
100%.
actually I might be talking about myself here. I feel seen. I'm that same way about that. Just like I think I've always been like, oh, I got by with it. It's okay, and then that runs you into trouble. So Jameis and I've always loved me some Jameis, and just brings a smile to my face to hear his voice, to hear his name. So when he said that, I was like, oh no, what are we doing? And then I went, no, that's good. That's what we need right there. We
That's a
need
great
that presence
point.
again.
Yeah, if some menacing linebacker, from
Yeah,
NC
yeah,
State, had said that to that kid, they might have been there might have been words exchanged, but everybody just laughed
correct.
because it was Jameis. And Castellanos, man,
Right.
yeah, again, I think he's got some of that personality. He's got the liveliness. He's, he apparently in the locker room, but serious on the field, but also, is having fun with it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a positive for them. So,
One
all
question
right.
on Tommy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we do you feel that the teammates genuinely like him? Your read on that? Does it seem that that's the situation, or is it a situation we'll have to wait and see? I'm just saying from what
Yeah,
you've seen.
no, I gotcha. I'm not as close to it as I was a year ago when we were at practice every day.
Hmm.
Because you could watch, that was the one real positive to being a practice was you could see some of those interactions, just even nonverbal things. You could see things away from even when they were practicing, if there were water breaks and things like that, who gravitates to them and that type of thing. Um, I think I think, I don't know that he's is quite as beloved as a Jameis. But I do think they appreciate the efforts he's made. Like he has
Hmm.
made huge efforts to be that guy. Like he wants to be that guy. Like they did a charity event a few weeks ago where nobody was required to be there, but some of the guys were going, and Tommy went to it. And somebody on the staff made the comment to me is like he wants to be one of the guys. Like he wants to be with them.
Hmm.
It's a low bar. DJ did not, I mean,
Hmm.
because DJ just didn't, he wasn't in that place in his life, and he just that effort wasn't there. So I don't know that Tommy's beloved yet. I think maybe that may come through the course of the season, how he plays, how he handles highs and lows. I think they like him. I think they're excited about his talent. It's hard for me to say that they love him because I just don't know yet. But I think everybody at least respects that he's made so many efforts. He wants to be one of them, and I think that means a lot. Um, but yeah, I'm not saying it because I know that it's not. I don't know for sure that it is
Sure,
as of yet. But I don't think there's any question. They know he's the guy when it comes to making plays, and I think they appreciate the efforts he's made to be one of them. And I think we'll have to see that in real time because I don't have the answer on that.
sure. But that's encouraging because if you don't play for your quarterback, then you're not playing for a lot. I think it's crucial, and not
Yeah.
that I don't want to keep saying we quit last year. I don't think we did quit, but there clearly wasn't a, oh, that happened. Let me go to this guy for leadership. There wasn't that situation where there was a fight for that guy specifically. And you could see it on bad teams. You can see bad teams playing and they're fighting for a quarterback who's not even good. Like there's a real difference in teams that want to play for their quarterback and teams that are kind of whatever about it.
100%, man, 100%. And I think the problem is a lot of times we want to make it media or fans as the team quit or the team was all in. And
Mm.
it's like a lot of times it may be in here. And I think that team last year was probably in here, and it started to lean towards the quitting side. But I don't think it's always all or nothing. And
Right.
but if you do have a team, even if it's not super talented, and if they are all bought in and all and want to play for that quarterback, yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, we've seen it countless times in
Right.
sports where even a marginal quarterback, guys rally around him. And so, yeah, man, that's going to be one of the things to definitely watch and look forward to see. All right, dude, we got to take off. Episode 3 in the books. If you guys like this, please give it a thumbs up, share it, tell people about it. If you're on the message boards, if you're at warchant.com, go on our message boards. We had a couple of people made some comments this week on our Renegade Room or this past week, saying that they liked the first episode. So if you like the shows, keep watching and keep telling people about it. And we'll be back soon with another edition of The Sauce.